Well, for those of you online, at the bottom of my email, you'll actually see a book a meeting function. And if you ever need like just half an hour to just run through something, or you've got an impact model assessment that's due and you're freaking out, please just get in contact, because we can just do, these 10-minute team sessions or 20-minute team sessions. I get lots of those from particularly Queensland clients and around grant application time. So please feel free to just reach out to me individually as well, and I can help you guys out. Can you see my screen? Yep, awesome. So this is the community and economic profile that RDA NT subscribe to. And then as part of that, we provide information for basically all of your LGAs across the Northern Territory, which is really, really good. There's two sections or two, programs that you guys subscribe to, and that's the community profile, which is this red tool, and the economic profile, which is the green tool. The community profile, the really great thing about that at the moment is it's been updated for all of your census information. So CEFA, the disadvantage index, which is sort of an index of disadvantage which compares all local government areas across Australia, is the last one that gets updated. And that's been updated now across all of the sites. So you can basically get on this, get on the red tool and know that you're getting the most up-to-date community data that you will find. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, now we've got these areas and you can sort of come across here and see the specific localities and geographies that we're referring to. But if you go to the bottom of the page, there's actually a menu of items down here. And I really like this because if I'm, for you guys working in local government or for the NT government, sometimes, someone will ask you for something and you forget where specific topics. So if you come down here to the bottom of the page, you'll be able to specifically look and find those topics really easily, and you'll be able to find your local government areas that you're talking about and the overlay areas, which is really, really good. It's really handy to be able to go straight to that. So the first thing I'm going to take you to is the population highlights page. And this here, even though it says RDA Northern Territory, it's just the Northern Territory. It is literally the Northern Territory area. So you can see here, this just gives us a little snapshot of all of the data that you guys get out of the census, basically. So if you're looking for specific things like the median age, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population of the NT, you've got lone person household, median weekly mortgage payment, repayments, et cetera, et cetera. You can go right down to your index of disadvantage here. And when you look at these tiles, you can see here that beside that 33, it's actually got an arrow and it says a 1. And that's because that's increased by 1 year between census periods. Okay, so you can see there the median age has gone from 32 to 33 from 2016 to 2021. Okay, so we can go through here and we can look here. We've had an increase in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population, and you can actually export all of this data just into a PDF. So you'll come on here, fill out your email address, and you'll get a PDF of all of the tiles on this page, which I think is really handy. The other thing you can do is you can break that down by council area. So if I wanted to just look at Alice Springs, I can come on here and I can see my estimated resident population, which is my official population count for Alice Springs, is 28,922. Okay, so you can get some really nice pieces of data from here, which I think it's really, really handy when your mayor or your CEO comes in and says, well, what's the median income of our area or whatever it might be. So that's a really cool page to go to. And I would encourage you to, when you're sitting at your desk, just click on that one and print it out and have it in your top drawer ready for those questions. The next thing I'm going to quickly take you to is your population summary. Okay, and see how I'm still on Alice Springs Town Council. So I can change that at any point. So I can change that to Roper Gulf. If I want to look at Roper Gulf, and I can change my benchmark area. So if I want to compare Roper Gulf to the rest of Australia, I can do that. So if I've got a grant application, I know we've got the Growing Regions Fund out at the moment, but if you've got a grant application and it's with the federal government, your benchmark area you'll try and set as Australia. So you can really show that difference between the uniqueness of Roper Gulf compared to the rest of Australia. So here we've got Roper Gulf, we come down and we can see here we get these 3 population counts for the area. And our estimated resident population, this is for 2021 during census, was 7,442. Our enumerated population was 9,925. So that's people that were in Roper Gulf Regional Council area on the night of the census. Okay, and then we've got our usual resident population, which is people who usually reside there. So they do some back counting and things like that. So if I am in Darwin on census night, I would be counted in Darwin's enumerated population. Okay, and then my usual resident population, I would be back counted to Livingston Shire Council in Queensland. Okay, so that's how the counts work. And the reason why that's important is because particularly in northern council areas, your enumerated population is typically higher than your estimated resident population or your usual resident population. And the reason for that is because it's peak tourism season. So it's particularly important for councils because they look at this enumerated population count and they say, okay, well, in Cairns Regional Council, which is probably a good example, or even Darwin, those council areas have a high enumerated population during that period. So what they can do is they can start to think about infrastructure services and how often they need to mow the lawns and things like that based on the amount of people that are in that region during that peak tourism season. So those counts are important, okay? When we come down, we also get our selected subpopulation categories. So things like your employed population. Overseas visitors is always an interesting one, particularly because it was during COVID. So we can see there's been a fall in overseas visitors. And then, of course, we get information on our dwellings, which shows that our average household size in Roper Gulf has fallen from 3.69 down to 3.31 during that period. Okay, so that can have some implications for housing in your regions as well. Then we go to our population estimates, and we can see here how our population, now we always give you the data table and you can export that into Excel or Word, but I mainly live in the charts because I can look at a chart and go, okay, I can see what's changing over time. And you can see here from 2006 to 2022, we've had relatively steady and sustainable growth in the region. And then we can compare that growth to the rest of Australia. Okay, so 0.6% growth in the Roper Gulf region between 21 and 22 there. Okay, and here's our annual change in ERP year on year. Okay, so we can do that for any of our council areas. So let's just have a look at Alice Springs. So we've had here 6 years of pop growth in Alice Springs, and we can see there compared to the rest of Australia, higher than average growth in 2020, 2021. And then 2022, we've just fallen behind, and partially that will be because of the comeback of international migration moving into our city centres as well. Okay, any questions? Jump in along the way, guys, so I can answer the question while I'm on the page. You can also export this entire page into Word or PDF. So anything you see here, you can pretty much export. Okay, so I'll just do that blanket approach to exporting the information and using the information in your documents. When I give presentations, what I'll typically do is use a snip and sketch, and I'll just take this out and place it straight into a presentation or a file or a report that we might be giving on a particular region. So you can do that as well, but you can also export into various different files if you need to. So it's really, really handy for you guys to use as part of your presentations. The next thing I'm going to go to is my 5-year age groups. And this is really, really important. This is one of the first things we look at when we get our census information. So when I go to a region and I've and I'm having a look, I'll say, okay, I want to have a look at the demographics of the population. So how old are the population and that sort of thing. So I'm going to move past my data table, and I can see here in the charts, very, very strong in that 25 to 40 year age group. Okay, much higher than the Australian average. I'm going to change that average. I want to look at that compared to the Northern Territory, because we know the Northern Territory is relatively young. So we can see here, still very strong in those age groups, and particularly here in our 30 to 40-year-olds, we can see much higher than the RDA average. Where we dip out is in when kids finish in school, which is no surprise, moving to other localities for university and that sort of thing. And of course, it's interesting through here that we have higher than average through our latter part of our working life, or our early retirees in our community as well. So that's an interesting way of looking at. Very much follows a similar pattern to the Northern Territory region as well. When we move down here, we want to have a look at how that has changed between 2016 and 2021. So this is really important for us to say, okay, what is our dominant population in our community, which is sort of our 25 to 40-year-olds. What we want to have a look at here is how is the population changing? And we can see still growth through this area through here, through our 30 to 40-year-olds, but we are seeing small amounts of growth in our 60 plus, which is our retiree, early retiree, latter part of the workforce type population. And we can see this decline here as well, perhaps people moving out of the community for career aspirations, things like that. So certainly we can see what's happening here in terms of the population. And this is an interesting one here because it creates a greater demand on your healthcare services in Alice Springs. So something to really think about. When we move down here, we get this dominant and emerging group analysis. So the dominant group analysis is fixated on this slide, whereas the emerging group analysis is looking at our change in the age structure. Okay, so those are both really important things for you guys to look at for your individual communities as well. I'm going to move down to how we live. The reason for that is this is a really hot topic at the moment, and it talks to us about our housing. Okay, and I'm actually going to go on and have a look at it for, actually, maybe we might have a look at it for Darwin. And our benchmark area automatically changes there to the Northern Territory, which is good. Okay, so this is our household structure. Okay, so this is what are our households made up of? And we can see here when we come down, it's broken down into couples with children, couples without children, one-parent families, lone person households. And we can see here in the city of Darwin, it's mainly over 25% couples with children, okay, which is no surprise, okay, that's no surprise. When we look at what's coming second there, we've got our couples without children. So these potentially could be young workers, or they could be retirees, that sort of thing. And then we've got our lone person household, which in a place like Darwin, because of the industry base there, it could be made up of an elderly population, where widows or divorcees or things like that, single people in the older age category, but it can also be made up of young workers, so doing fly in, fly out, that sort of thing, drive in, drive out. Okay, so this is our household type. So we're mainly dominant in our couples with children. What we want to have a look at is how that has changed between census periods. And we can see here the majority of change is in our lone person household. And that's really, really important. And if there's anyone from Darwin here, that sort of gives us a bit of an indication when we start thinking about what types of accommodation do we require in the city of Darwin to take care of housing needs for the population. And we can see there that growth in our lone person household. And it's really important to start to think about, well, what is that lone person household for Darwin? We've also seen growth in one-parent families. We're seeing that across the board, with divorce rates up and different things like that. This also places pressure on housing, because suddenly where we required one home, we now require two homes. So it does present greater challenges for the housing market as well. Okay, so that's something certainly to think about, is that lone person household. Okay, once again, we get that dominant and emerging group analysis down below. Now, another thing we want to look at in our household summary is our household size. Okay, and let's go down here. We'll go past our table, we'll go past our tables and go to our charts, and we can see 1- and 2-person households are our dominant household size. Okay, so 32% of households are 2-person households in Darwin, followed by 25% are 1-person households. And then the rest are either group or family composition. When we move down and we say, okay, well, how has that changed? We can see mainly changed through our lone person household, through that 1-person household. So that's really another really important way of looking at it. It sort of backs up the story that we were looking at previously. Then what we want to look at is our dwelling type. Okay, so this is more on that supply side. So previously we were looking at demand. So what do we demand? We demand, we're moving more towards that lone person, those lone person households, which we have been doing for some time. When we move down here, this is where we're looking at our supply. What do we supply in the city of Darwin? And we can see here mainly separate house, but not as much as the rest of the Northern Territory. So we're a little bit different in Darwin because we have this mix. We have this mix of medium density and we have this mix of high density. So interesting that we roll from separate house, and then our next greatest amount of housing is our high density, very reflective of a tourist community as well. When we move down, we want to have a look at our change. So this is good news. Okay, so when we look at your change in your family structure and your household structures, we can see there that shift to 1-person households. Well, we are creating supply that perhaps might cater more appropriately for that part of the population, followed then by our separate houses, which is also important because when we think about what we're trying to attract to our region, we're trying to support families and which utilise our schools and our parks and all of that sort of thing. So a real mix there. For the city of Darwin, we've got no real medium density coming online, which is something perhaps to think about for that region. So that gives us a really good look at our supply side and what we're supplying in the community. Okay, so that's our how do we live. I'm going to quickly take you to the CEPA index because this is really important. We've got our Growing Regions Fund coming up, and you guys will be putting in some applications, but we can see here, this gives us a score of relative advantage or disadvantage, and it takes into consideration things like, income levels in your community. It takes into consideration car ownership, education, things like that. So you have a higher level of advantage if you have a higher level of those things in your community. Okay, so here, this gives us a score of, it's not really out of a particular number. I think it goes up to 1,400 or 1,500, but you can see here, the most advantaged council area is Litchfield Council LGA, followed by City of Darwin, Greater Darwin, we go down City of Palmerston, then followed by Alice Springs, Katherine, right down to West Daly Regional Council area, which gets a score of 439.5, which is very, very low. Okay, so as part of your applications for Growing Regions, you would use this score because what they do is they use this score to basically compare you guys to other areas in Australia. Okay, so for my home state in Queensland, the area with the highest level of advantage or the lowest level of disadvantage is Weipa. Okay, so if you've ever been to Weipa, which I've been a couple of times, it's not the most beautiful place in the world, but it has very highly educated people. It's owned by BHP pretty much, all of those sorts of things. So there's a lot of different little attributes, but it's an important measure to use as part of your grant applications. Okay, so really, really important. This is some post-census updates. So if I'm going down the left-hand side of the toolbar there and I'm looking at job seeker recipients, okay, and I really, really like this data. All right, this data gives us an indication of who is accessing job seeker or youth allowance across the table. Okay, so it gives us a real measure of how many people are actually accessing that, you know, from the Department of Social Services each month. Okay, so it's a really nice way of being able to follow and monitor Centrelink payments in your region. So, and I really like it because it's updated monthly. So you get some real-time data. And when we look at labour force survey data, so when we look at the actual unemployment rate for small areas, it can jump around a lot. Even when you smooth out the series, it can still jump around a lot, which means that it doesn't tend to give us a great picture sometimes of what might be actually going on in the community. Whereas this gives us an indication of people who are actually going in and accessing those payments. So we're up to May 2023, okay, and we've got it set on March 2020. We can actually, I think that's the first date that we were actually given the go-ahead to use this particular data set was during COVID. And we can see there, we can compare over different time periods. All right, and we can see that from March 2020 through to May 2023, in the Northern Territory, we've had an additional 3,795 people accessing job seeker or youth allowance in the Northern Territory. And we can move down here and we can see Alice Springs, that's actually fallen by 153. And we can see it's mainly in the Indigenous communities where we're seeing an increase. And I suspect that's partially either because there may be greater access to services in those regions, correct me if I'm wrong, or there's been a change in funding mechanisms for particular areas, because that you can see there across all of the Indigenous areas, we're seeing fairly strong increases in people accessing job seeker or youth allowance payments. So it's a really great way to be able to monitor what's happening in your community. And I know I'm moving fast down to the bottom of the page, but we can see here, you can actually break this down, and I can break this down for you, Jack, or for your community. You can't see it very well on here, but we can show you over time what's been changing in your community. And the important, and one of the reasons why that's really important is because it can give you some, I guess, idea of what particular events happened at what time to be able to change your level of recipients, job seeker or youth allowance recipients in your community. So that's another really good one to monitor. I think you can, on this page, guys, sign up for updates when this particular data set gets updated. You can get your data updates, and I would do that because this is a really good one to be able to monitor month on month what's changing in terms of your Centrelink payments and things like that. So the next thing I'm going to show you here is your reports. So there's lots of training tools on here, training videos, things like that. As well, down the bottom, you can see there's a help center, blogs, all of that sort of thing. There is also this area that we've created, which is a report writing section. And if you come on here, you can actually grab a number of these items, so a number of these topics, and I've got it on City of Darwin, LGA. I can change that to the Northern Territory and change my benchmark area to Australia. So I'm comparing the Northern Territory to the rest of Australia. And you can come on here, tick all of these boxes, and then when you come down here, you put your email address in and you can send yourself the report in PDF or Word. My suggestion is to send it to yourself in Word and take out all of the information that you don't need, so you're not printing off pages and pages of data tables and things like that. So this is another good way of being able to access the information quickly, print it off, put it on your desk and have a look at it at a later date. But it does give you a really good overview and a good little document to be able to have to look at all of your data for your region. So that's the community profile. Any questions? Anything in the chat? No. Awesome. Good stuff, guys. So now we're going to move over to the economic profile. Now, the economic profile is a little bit more complicated. I'm not going to go through all of the data sets. I'm going to go through the ones that I think are probably the most important for you guys to understand over time. Okay, so the difference between the green tool and the red tool is the green tool, all of the economic data tells us about all of the businesses in your community. It tells us about your working population, your jobs, what value you're creating out of specific industries, all of that sort of thing. It's a really good tool to monitor how your economy is changing over time. Okay, one of the key differences is that the economic profile is updated yearly. Okay, so the economic profile every year in about March, April, we update all of the data based on national, state and territory input-output tables. So we're able to collect that data, those national and state accounts, and we're able to put that into the profiles to be able to come up with what we call local area modules, or local area data sets. So here we're on the tool for RDA Northern Territory. So we can see here the RDA Northern Territory's gross regional product is estimated at 26.18 billion. In your territory, we can see 133,717 jobs, but we have 134,176 employed residents, which means that we have people leaving the Northern Territory every day for work in other localities, which is no surprise. The largest industry by employment is public administration and safety across the territory there. So is there a question? No, I just had a beep. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the gross product for the Northern Territory. Okay, and we can see how that has changed over time since 2001. Okay, and this is what I mean by updated yearly data. We can see here we had 2020, 2021, and now we've just updated the data for 2022. And we can see there's been very strong growth in the Northern Territory between 21 and 22. And what our job is to be able to look at, well, what is actually driving that growth in the Northern Territory? What has created that extra level of wealth in our community? Okay, and we can see how that's because we're comparing Northern Territory to Northern Territory. I might change my benchmark to Australia. Okay, and we'll come down here and we can see the Northern Territory is actually growing at a faster rate than the rest of Australia. So we can see growth in 2022 at 5.2% compared to Australia at 3.7%. But look at how that's jumped around in the last 3 years. Okay, so we can have a look at what's actually been driving that growth over the previous year. And that's what's really important about yearly data. Okay, yearly data, particularly for places like the Northern Territory or little places or places that can be affected quite quickly from changes in policy, we need to have that yearly data set. Okay, so we can see here 5.19% growth between 21 and 22. Okay, 3.6 in Australia. So here's some of your media grabs, Jack. If you guys do any of that sort of stuff, you're able to grab some of this information out as well. So we can see strong growth in the NT from 21 to 22. And over time, we can see that whilst there's been some little hiccups along the way, we've really had some nice sustainable growth in the economy. So that's our wealth. So when we look at GRP, we're looking at wealth in our community. Now I want to look at jobs. Okay, because sometimes we can have growing wealth, but we've actually got a decline in jobs. And so it's more related to the value of product than it is about us employing lots more people, and the economy is really, there's lots of economic development going on. And here we can see we've had a slight fall away in jobs. So it's been relatively flat over the previous 4 years. And we can see there just a slight decline in jobs between 2021 and 22. And jobs growth certainly not as fast as the rest of Australia. Now, some of that can be because this is jobs that are filled. Okay, so one of the things at the moment that I remind people is that a lot of places are actually crying out for workforce, particularly in our hospitality, construction industries, healthcare. So if we actually had access to to staff or to people to be able to fill those jobs, to the skills, to the labour force, then our figures might be a little bit different. Okay, so it is a little bit reflective of a very tight labour market as well. So we need to keep that in mind. But our jobs rate has been declining over the last 5 years. Okay, so that's really important to know. So thinking about, and I know there's been some really nice strategies in the NT, and I hear lots of information on the radio and things like that around jobs, working in Darwin and the Northern Territory and things like that, particularly in your police services and hospitals as well. And so you are reaching out beyond the borders to be able to tap into employment markets. So that's your gross product and your local employment. Two really important things for you guys to look at. So every year, that's the first place we start. So when we get our new data, when I trawl through the sites of all of the clients, that's the first place we start. Then we come to building approvals, because building approvals gives us a bit of a hint of what perhaps might be coming into the future. And we can see here the light green is our non-residential. So that can be things like roads, commercial premises, it can be hospitals, schools, but it's employment creating. So it's really important that we have this nice level of light green in our community, because hopefully what we're doing is we're creating infrastructure to support jobs into the future. And then the dark green is our residential building approvals, which is also really important at the moment, given our housing shortages in the communities and rental shortages, things like that. Okay, so that's our three sort of headline figures that we want to look at. We want to look at gross product, local employment, and building approvals. The next thing then we want to look at is we want to go down to our economic value. So I'm basically just following the toolbar on the left there, and then I want to look at my value add. Okay, and the reason I'm looking at my value add is because I want to look at profitability in my community. Okay, I want to see what industries are the most profitable. Okay, now I'm still on RDA Northern Territory. I've got my benchmark as Australia. I want to change my comparison year, because I want to see what has happened over the previous 1 year to drive that big charge in GRP in the Northern Territory over that 1 year period. And you can see here mining, oil and gas extraction, metal ore mining, non-metallic mineral mining, exploration, other mining support services are all up. Okay, and then when we come down here, it's not just mining that's performed well, but we've also got some nice growth in manufacturing, basic chemical and chemical product manufacturing. So see here, I'm just clicking on that headline industry, and then I get my subsectors. Okay, so I look at my subsectors, which is really, really handy, because you want to be able to drill down and say, okay, food product manufacturing has actually fallen. So what has happened in that sector that perhaps we need to have a think about supporting or changing or challenging in that particular area? So we can see there a fall of almost 40 million. So when we come down, we can see growth in electric, construction, retail is starting to come back, accommodation, food services still falling. So that will be still a lot to do with COVID. We can see transport's up, rental, hiring, real estate, no surprise, public admin and safety is up. Public order, safety and regulatory services. Education and training is up. That might be a little bit to do with tertiary. Yes, tertiary education coming back online. So that's coming off a very small base, remembering what happened during COVID. Healthcare and social assistance is up. Social assistance services, this is certainly one to think about. So when we look at healthcare and social assistance, we can see we're up by almost 90 million. Okay, but almost 72 million of that is possibly related, when we think about social assistance services, to NDIS. So something to think about there, because really where we want to see our investment is in our hospitals and our medical and other healthcare services as well. Social assistance is important, but certainly we need to continue this growth in our hospitals and other healthcare as well. So we can come down here, guys, into our, sorry, I'll go there. This is our value add by industry sector. So mining creates the highest level of value add in the NT, followed by public admin, then healthcare and social assistance. We've got construction up there as well. So those three big ones, we've got the mining, healthcare, and we've got public admin and safety. When we come down here and we see our change, this is really nice. Okay, so we can see small increments of change across majority of our industries. Okay, it's our mining, however, that is driving that big change in terms of our value in our community, in terms of our GRP. And once again, you get that dominant and emerging group analysis, which is pretty much the types of things I'm talking to you about, just all written there, so you can use that as part of any of the work that you're doing. So this is a good one for you guys to go back, put in your particular area. So if we're looking at East Arnhem, put in your particular area and move down and start to have a look at, well, what are the things that are changing in my community? We can see mining has fallen in that particular area. We can see electric is up, retail is up, transport, postal, warehousing is up, rental, hiring, real estate, but we're down in things like healthcare and social assistance. We're down in construction. We're down in manufacturing, down a little bit in ag as well. Okay, so I would encourage you to jump on, have a look at your particular area and see what's changed over that period. Okay, so the next thing, the same thing, I'm going to do the same thing, but this time for employment. Okay, so I wanted to look at what's driving our GRP. Now I want to have a look at what's driving those little falls in our jobs. So here we can see, this is no surprise. So ag, we lost 181 workers. Okay, we're very, very short on supply in that particular sector at the moment in terms of employment. So that's happening across the board. We are seeing growth because of the value of product, but we have seen very much falls in terms of jobs in those particular sectors. And that's basically due to not being able to access international workers and things like that. But we can see, take out ag, we're not going too bad. We've got our mining here, has had some growth. Declines in manufacturing, food product manufacturing relates then back to that ag sector as well. Petroleum and coal product manufacturing declines. Electric, gas and water is up. Accommodation and food service up. That's really interesting because your value has come down, so prices might be falling, but we've got more people working in that sector. Let's come straight down to our tables. We can see where we have our greatest amount of employment is in public admin and safety, followed by healthcare and social assistance, followed by, let's have a look here, was sort of education and training, retail, construction. Okay, and then we move down here and we can see this fall away in our public admin and safety over a year's period. Let's have a look at what that is. Public administration. So perhaps there's been a downsizing of the NT government. Can anyone confirm or deny that? Or within councils? Defence is up and public order, safety and regulatory services is up. So we can see there's been a big decline in public admin in that particularly here. The other thing that I've been noticing across a number of councils that I've visited is because the COVID injection was mandatory, or was compulsory in a lot of public service sectors and hospitals and things like that, we did see a fall away of jobs in those particular areas over, during particular time periods. So that might be something to think about there as well. Okay, that's really interesting. So that's your local employment. When we come on here, this is where we can start to drill a little bit deeper into some of our sectors. Okay, so if you're looking at healthcare and social assistance in the Northern Territory, or you want to look at it for Alice Springs, for example, and I want to say, okay, I want to have a look particularly at our healthcare sector, I can come on here and I've selected Alice Springs. I've still got my, I'll change my benchmark to the Northern Territory. But if I come down here, I'm comparing Alice to the Northern Territory. I'm looking specifically at healthcare and social assistance. My comparison year is 2020, 2021. So I'm just looking over the last year. And here I'm seeing I've got my employment has grown by 71. My full-time employment has grown by 21. Let's have a look at things like output total sales is up, which is no surprise because a lot of surgeries have come back online and different things like that after COVID. Here's our productivity per worker. Here is up as well. And compared to the Northern Territory, it's stronger. And we can come down here and we can see our economic output by destination. So we've got mainly it's locals, followed by domestic, so others coming in from around the region accessing the services. So we can start to have a look at what's happening in our healthcare sector. The other thing we can do is, I'm just on my industry sector analysis. I'm going to move over to my time series so I can have a look at how it's changing over time in Alice Springs. So this is your employment in your hospital sector. So when you're thinking about funding for hospitals and things like that, it's important to come in and have a look at some of these things. So we can see here there's been really strong growth since 2019. But let me have a look at, is that actually in our hospitals? Okay, so how much of that is being driven by social assistance? So we can see here we've had a little bit of growth between 21 and 22 in terms of employment, and stronger than the NT. Let's have a look at social assistance. And we can see we've had very strong growth since 2016, which wouldn't surprise me if that's when NDIS really started to take off in the community. So we can see there 2016 to 2021, that growth in social assistance services in Alice Springs. Okay, so there's other ways. So you're able to drill down to be able to have a really good look at what's happening in particular sectors. So let's have a look at our output here. This is for social assistance, remember, and we can see here very strong growth. Okay. So really interesting. Okay, so that's our industry focus. Okay, the next thing I'm going to take us to is just our local workers. So guys, you can come in here and have a play around with this study. You can't break the tool, but here we can see in the Alice Springs Town Council, 47.5% of the local workers are males and 52.5% are female. And what you can do is you can actually grab specific industries. If I want to look at manufacturing in Alice Springs, I can see here how many workers are in the industry, what age categories they fit into, what are the occupations of those workers, are they full-time, part-time, what sort of qualifications do they have, what income levels, how they travel to work, things like that. So you can get a really good idea of you know, who's working in the sector. And we can see here other characteristics: born overseas, 71, so 30% of the workforce pretty much are born overseas. So that's really interesting as well. So you're able to get a really good picture of your workforce. We can get our occupations. So when we come in here, and I'm on manufacturing, and we can see what type of occupations people have. So if you're doing anything around skills, or you're looking at specific skills required for industries that you're trying to grow, this is a good way of being able to look at, well, what's currently there, what qualifications do people have, things like that. So we can see here local workers operation, so mainly technicians and trade workers, managers, and labourers in your manufacturing sector. So it's a really good way of being able to look at what you might require in terms of trying to build that sector in your community. So we can see technicians and trade workers have had the greatest growth between 16 and 21. Okay, and you can start to piece together all the different variables of that particular sector. Okay, next thing I'll look at really quickly is my tourism sector analysis. So when we come down here, now this has all been updated. So this all talks about, you know, how many people are employed. I'll head straight down to the chart, and we can see here Alice Springs compared to the Northern Territory, lots more in terms of output and sales, and lots more in terms of value add for the community. And we can see how that's changed over time, and it's just starting to come back, and we're seeing that across lots of communities at the moment, that value of tourism just starting to come back. And with international visitation coming back, we're hoping that we'll see some nice rises in that area. Here's your employment in the sector, both indirect and direct. Now, remembering that employment, the way we calculate employment in the tourism sector is we take bits of different industries. So we take a little bit of accommodation, retail, art and heritage. We also take some transport and things like that. So we can see there employment in the sector, and then we can also look at our tourism visitor summary, and hopefully we've got enough data so we don't have our domestic day trippers. Tourism Research Australia have changed the way they're collecting a lot of their data, but we can see here mostly domestic visitor nights, a little bit of international visitor nights. So we would hope to see that come back now that the borders are open, working, functioning, all of that sort of thing as well. So it's our Tourism Australia. Let me have a look at that I just want to have a look what it's looking like for the NT. Just going to compare that to Australia. So let's see what's happening here, because we're seeing lots of change at the moment. So compared to Australia, you can see that the Northern Territory is very much a tourist destination in its own right. We can see there has been some growth between 21 and 22. We can see here too, interesting enough, from 2017, it really was falling year on year anyway, and then COVID's hit, and we can see the impact that COVID has had on the economy. A little bit of comeback there in 2022, both in terms of value and in terms of employment. Let's have a look at our visitors. Okay. So we can see here domestic visitor nights. Domestic visitor nights is what is driving that growth in our value add. We can see we've got some domestic day trips and a little bit of international coming back. So very much follows the same pattern to what we're seeing in lots of other localities at the moment. So that domestic visitor nights is really what is driving the extra value in the community. So always remembering that, you know, in terms of being able to, it's really about creating that value out of that tourist. And an Australian tourist, they tend to spend more money than an international tourist traveling to Australia, if that makes sense. So if we're going overseas, we tend to spend more money overseas than perhaps people coming to Australia will spend. So it's been a really good opportunity for communities to tap into that domestic market, domestic visitor night market, while people weren't traveling overseas as well. Now, Jack, did you want me to go through the economic impact model?
Yes, please, that'd be great.
Yeah, we'll go through it. Okay, let me have a look. RDANT. Okay, awesome. So guys, we know we've got the Growing Regions Fund coming up, and often they will ask you for an economic impact assessment, okay, as part of that application process. When you come on here, so you might have to ask Jack for the password from RDA, so they will provide you with the details, and then what you will do is you'll come on here and you'll find your council area. So let's say it's in Darwin, City of Darwin, LGA. And what you'll do is you'll enter your project title, and it might, I'll just put in Growing Regions, and I'll just use an example that I use every time. And it's a community centre, and it was one that we did in Western Queensland. Now you can see here, if you need help, you can get all of these guides: grant application guides, economic impact model guide, event impact modelling guide. Okay, or if you need help from us, you can often contact Jack, and then she'll put us in, she'll put you in contact with us, and we'll be able to help you to deliver your economic impact assessment as well. So this was a particular project. It was a community centre in Western Queensland, and it had a construction phase to the project. So council were wanted to build this community centre. I think it was 3.2 million. So it wasn't a huge community centre, but they were building this community centre, and they wanted to put in, I think, 1.2 million or something like that, and they wanted the state and federal government to put in additional funding. Make sure you use the total value of the project. So don't put in, well, we're only spending 1.8 million, so it's going to be 1.8 million, or the value of what we're asking from you is 2 million, we're just going to put that. You need to put the total value of the grant. Okay, now when you click on your impacted sector in the construction phase, you can see here you get this choice of building, heavy and civil, or construction services. If you're building, if it's just a sort of, you know, a community centre, or it's a community harbour, it's commercial premise or something like that, it'll just be building construction. If it's like a bridge or things like that, that will be your heavy and civil, roads, things like that. And then, of course, you won't use construction services. So, or you can just use, if you're in a smaller community, just use construction. Okay, so I'm just going to put it on building construction. Now, the project was to take 6 months. So I'm just putting in here 0.5 because it was half a year to build this particular project. It was actually going to be 3.2 million. So I'll put in 3.2 million there for the construction costs. Okay, so it's that simple. It's literally, what is the project? How much does it cost? And how long is it going to take to build? Okay, now if you've got a project that it's phased in over 5 years. So say, for example, the first year, it might be you're doing, you know, building one of a 3-building project or something like that. You will run the model 3 times. I would suggest running the model 3 times, because year 1, you might say, well, in year 1, it's going to be X amount of economic impact. In year 2, it's going to be X amount of economic impact. And then in year 3, it's going to be X amount of economic impact based on the project deliverables. Okay, so there are those little things. My suggestion is, if you have to run the model more than once, run it more than once. So if you've got components of projects, run it 2, 3, 4 times. Okay, this project also had an ongoing operational phase. Okay, and the ongoing operational phase was there was going to be 2 new council staff. So 2 new council staff were going to be working at this particular centre. So they weren't people moving from another building over to the new community centre, it was actually 2 additional staff. So 2 public administration staff. Here I'm going jobs and I'm putting in 2 and I run the model. Okay, it's that simple. Now, if, for example, you also need to add in another sector, you can just put in add, remove a sector, and you might have someone who's going to be working. You might also be, you know, have a food retailing outlet at this particular community centre. So you might put food retailing, jobs, 2 jobs, 2 FTEs, okay, full-time equivalents. Okay, so they didn't have that there, but that's how you use that part of the model. Okay, so here I've got click to update the model. All right, and then when I come down here, I can see Project Growing Regions Community Centre for City of Darwin, construction phase, adding 3.2 million in building construction over 6 months, and operational phase, adding 2 jobs in public administration. And here's my economic impact highlights. Okay, so we've got our $3.2 million direct economic impact, which is what the project costs, and then we've got $3.26 million worth of indirect. So my output is 6.46 million. Okay, then I've got my value add and I've got my local jobs per year as well. And then I've got my operational phase. And then when you come down here, you'll get this little table here, okay, which I'm sort of highlighting and I'm scrolling down. You can see impacts on the City of Darwin, 6.46 million in terms of your output. So I normally look at the output column and I look at my local jobs column. Okay, so I've got my total impact on the City of Darwin is 6.46. Then I've got my type 1 and type 2 multiplier. Now they are unique multipliers for the City of Darwin, and it talks to us about how the money flows through the economy. Okay, the higher the multiplier, the more the money flows through the economy. Then here we've got impact on Northern Territory economy. So total impact on the NT. So we had 6.46 on Darwin, 6.79 on the Northern Territory economy, and then the total impact on the Australian economy is 10.55 million. So that's the figure that you would use when in your application when they ask you what is the total economic impact of the project on the Australian economy. Okay, so that's for the construction phase. And then you come down here, guys, and you get all of this information about how those jobs flow through the economy, all of that sort of thing. The most important piece is here where we've got our output. We've got our local jobs because we've got 34 jobs in the City of Darwin. Okay, we've also got 36 in the Northern Territory and 63 in Australia when we have that flow on through the Australian economy. Then when I've got my construction phase here, I just click it over and I get my operational phase. And I do the exact same thing. I look at my output. I can see my total impact on City of Darwin is 450,000. Okay, I've got my type 1 and type 2 multipliers, which they will never ask for. And the only reason we've got them there is just to show that difference, because grant agencies like it when you use multipliers that reflect your local area as opposed to your state. And the reason for that is because everyone's multiplier is different, because every LGA, people spend their money differently. They earn different wages. So here, for example, we're talking about people working in public administration. Okay, so someone working in public administration in Darwin is very different to someone working in public administration in Alice Springs or in Townsville or in Perth or Sydney. So they earn different money and they spend their money in different ways as well. Okay, so it's really important to show through the data what that actually means to the economy. So here we can see total impact 450,000. We come down here, total impact on the NT economy 480,000 and 780,000 total impact on Australian economy there as well. Okay, and then you get all of this information down the bottom. You can actually export all of this information into PDF or Word. and then you can put it as part of your application in your annex or whatever it appendix or whatever it might be, as part of your report as well. So that's the economic impact model. So any questions on that, guys? No. We also have.
I'm sorry, Kat.
You're right.
Can you just elaborate a little bit more on the building construction versus construction?
Yes. So this here, the reason why, look, in smaller communities, I would just use the construction tab. Okay. What it is they just carry a higher multiplier, like heavy and civil engineering construction would carry a little bit higher multiplier. And that's just because it's higher wages, things like that. So building construction, when I come in here, building construction is really if you're, you know, if a council's doing a residential development, we would use building construction. If council's doing, you know, like a community centre, you would do building construction. If it's a new hospital, I would still use building construction. If, for example, you're building a bridge, or you're doing, you know, like the Peninsula Development Road in the Cape, you know, you would use heavy and civil engineering construction because you're using a different workforce essentially. So that's kind of what that's kind of the real difference. The problem is when you're in smaller communities, the reason why I say just use construction is because you may not have enough workforce in heavy and civil engineering to just use heavy and civil engineering. Does that make sense? So you don't have the data to be able to make the conclusions or for the data to be able to be used effectively. So you just use the construction tab. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I'm just wondering that third option of construction services, what's the difference there?
So construction services, my understanding is that's just like your head office, like people just working in construction. So it's not actually delivering the work.
Delivering.
If that makes sense. Yeah, so it's more like your head offices and things like that. So if you were I guess if like I don't know, I'm trying to think of a home builder or a Tees building or something was moving to Brisbane or to Darwin or something like that, and you were adding, you know, X amount of jobs to that particular sector, you might use that, but it's just there because it's part of the drop down. You would never use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So any other questions, guys? It's quite user-friendly. The hardest bit of this model is really just picking what are the sectors that are impacted. And if the proponents or don't give you a very good indication of what, you know, how many people they're going to employ and things like that, you've almost got to come up with some sort of guesswork or you know, a non-exact science that will determine, well, how many people are going to be employed in public administration or that sort of thing. And we can help with some of that because we've probably done an economic impact model for someone in another area for a very similar reason. So we certainly have baselines and things like that we can help you with. The other thing, sometimes these, you know, like the growing regions, I'm not sure who this one's been done through, but, you know, the department might ask for additional information outside of what is in these tables. So say, for example, there was one particular grant that asked for how many people, how many Indigenous people would be employed as part of this project. We can come up with those numbers for you. So if there is, you know, a caveat or there is something in the grant applications that says, you know, we want to know how many Indigenous people this is going to impact or how many of our youth are going to be impacted, we can help you with that as well. Okay, so we can determine those numbers for you as part of your application as well. So that's kind of the economic impact model. The other thing online that you guys can get is when I talked about the reports in the community profile section, we've also got reports for the economy. So if you're looking at Alice Springs and, okay, our reports are down at the moment, but that's okay. You can come on here and you can grab all of these particular topics, enter your email and send it to yourself in PDF or Word, and you can get that report as well. So a lot of this information, some of it's really good supporting information to use as part of your grant application as well, to be able to say, well, we've got an economy, or, you know, our healthcare sector is in decline, or whatever it might be. So we need a new hospital, or we need this extension to our maternity facilities, or whatever it might be that you going for. So that's your report writing section. The other thing is you can actually get an industry sector report. So if you want, so I've got City of Darwin up there now. If you want to look at your manufacturing sector, you can click on manufacturing, and then you can get all of these data sets as well. Local worker information, worker productivity, imports, exports, all of that information, send it to yourself in PDF or Word. And you've got all of that information there to accompany your work as well. So are there any questions, guys? Anything I've missed, Jack, that you think is important?
No, I don't think so. Just wanted to clarify though, just in terms of the economic impact calculator.
Yeah.
That's currently only available to local councils, but if you do require, or you would like to look at a report for an application that you're submitting, and you don't have access to it, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Robin, and we can help you out with that.
Yeah, definitely. And you also, I just skipped over the event impact calculator. This is another calculator that we use, and it's specifically been designed for events, but I use it with a number of councils monitoring visitation. So it's really, you know, if you're holding a sporting event or something like that in your region, or a business event, or even if you're implementing a marketing strategy, and as part of that marketing strategy, you're saying we're going to increase visitation by 100 people a day, or whatever it might be, you can actually use this tool to be able to see what that can mean for your community. So if I use City of Darwin and I look at it and I say it's going to be a sport and recreation activity, and we're holding a rodeo or something, a local rodeo, you can come on here and let's say it's this Friday, event duration is 1 day. We've got, you know, 1,500 locals coming to it. We think that, you know, it's a $50 spend. And you can run that through the model to see what that actually means to your local economy. So your economic output, which is where we live for this particular, I don't use my jobs and I don't use my value add. I specifically look at my output for events. We can see here it's nearly $100,000 impact on the City of Darwin economy. Okay, so that's another way of being able to look at you know, specific events. But one of the things we did for Scenic Rim Council, they implemented a farm box strategy over a 3-month period. They did lots of marketing and advertising, and they sent out farm boxes, or, you know, of food and things like this. You could order online and they would deliver it to your door in Brisbane. It was particularly during COVID. And that what we did was we worked out for them how many additional visitors might be attributed to that particular strategy. So if we said we thought, you know, there was an extra 50 visitors per day, I'm totally guessing, from the region, because it was around the Brisbane area into Scenic Rim. Okay, we said art and heritage, and we just picked a date, attendance per day, additional 50 people, and we said we thought of those 50 people, they might spend an extra $20, okay, in the community. We submit that through the model. I hope I'm not losing anyone here, but you can see there modelling the effect of 1,000 an extra $1,000 basically per day into the community gives an output of 1,243, and then you could say, for example, times that by 360 days, and you would come up with what you thought was the additional yearly economic impact of this particular strategy if it resulted in an additional 50 people per day with an average daily spend of $20 per person. Okay, so there's ways in which we can use this data to, or use this model to really look at visitation as well, not just the impact of one event. It's really about that visitation to your economy and what that additional visitation means as well. So if you're doing things like that, if you've got events or you're thinking about doing a strategy around visitation, this is a really good way of being able to monitor that as well. So I think that's everything. If you need any, we've got this explanatory notes section. Industry sector definitions is something we get asked about a lot. Okay, and this just gives you a breakdown of what actually is agriculture, forestry, and fishing. What actually is mining, manufacturing, what is food product manufacturing, like what actually comes into that category. So that's a really good place to go as well, because you can start to break that down. When I was working in councils, I used to always think, well, what is, non-metallic mineral product manufacturing and things like this? And you can actually come on here and it gives you a really good idea of what is, electric supply and all of that sort of stuff as well. So that's another little hint. If you come on here, you get your industry sector definitions, and I just used to print that out and have it at my desk so that when I was doing grant applications and things like that, I knew exactly what those things were. Yes. So any questions, guys? Did I miss anything?
No, I think you've covered everything. But if there's any questions following on, if there's something that you think of, especially leading into a potential grant application, please don't hesitate to contact us. Happy to help out. And as Kat mentioned, if we're not sure on something, we'll reach out to Kat and she'll give us the response or the answers as well. And once again, with the Growing Regions program, Expressions of Interest open today. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd love to hear about your project and provide support where we can.
Yeah, and I have had some people reach out from the NT from the previous Zoom that we did. So definitely, if you need anything, please reach out. We're happy to help out.
Thanks, Kat. Thank you for joining us all today.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I'll stay online. I think, Alex, you wanted to chat? Yes.